Welcome to the deep dive. Our mission, as always, is to take complex information and, well, transform it into clear, actionable knowledge.
And today we are really taking on a huge topic.
We're looking at the foundational history of what you could call ethical leadership, and we're doing it through the life of a really pivotal figure, Abu Bakr as-Siddiq.
Right. And what makes this dive, I think, so unique is the source material we're working with. It's not a standard historical text.
No, not at all. It doesn't treat him as just some relic of the past, does it?
Not in the slightest.
Yeah.
The material frames his entire life as a profound study in integrity. How do you lead and lead effectively during what was basically an existential crisis? The goal is to pull out principles that are genuinely timeless.
And that word timeless is so important here. Our sources, they deliberately connect the 7th century to right now, to the 21st. They position this history as a kind of blueprint.
A blueprint for today's challenges.
Exactly. Even for things like the moral and ethical confusion that comes with the AI era. So we want to understand this figure not just as a piece of history, but through a very practical lens. For you, the listener, how does this apply?
We're really trying to move beyond just the biographical facts. We're dissecting how a man whose entire character saved a community 1,400 years ago can provide a working model for us today.
An age where technology is just, advancing way faster than our ability to ethically govern it.
That's the core mandate of this material we're looking at.
So our goal for right now is to give you a detailed but also inspiring introduction to his life. And, crucially, to lay out the framework the sources use to connect his history to your daily decisions. It's a systematic journey.
From historical fact to personal transformation.
We have a lot of ground to cover. Okay, let's unpack this.
So before we even get to the man himself, we have to talk about the architecture of the knowledge we're using. The sources are very, very explicit about this.
They are, and understanding their intent is, well, it's everything.
Right. They define themselves as a practical guide. And that one phrase fundamentally shifts how we should be approaching all the biographical details that follow.
Oh, absolutely. That distinction changes everything. If you pick up a standard history book, you're looking for academic stuff, chronology, politics, who did what when.
Right. Context. Societal shifts.
But if you're reading a practical guide, you're looking for something else entirely. You're looking for instructions, for lessons, for models of behavior you can actually use.
Exactly. The purpose here is synthesis. The guide is trying to fuse three big components. First, the timeless wisdom from the Islamic tradition.
Okay.
Second, the empirical reality of what actually happened, the historical events. And third, the specific demands of modern leadership, especially as you mentioned with the acceleration of the AI era.
So it's like a tri-layered approach to ethical development.
It is. So when you engage with this material, you're not just reading. You're basically entering a self-guided training module. It's designed to build up moral courage and clarity.
Which leads us right to the core directive from the sources. And this is probably the most important takeaway from this whole first segment. The real goal is transformation. It's not just about accumulating information.
And for our learner audience, for anyone listening who wants applicable knowledge, that emphasis is vital.
It is.
Because knowledge consumption is the easy part. Behavioral change based on that knowledge.
Yes.
That's the hard part. The sources just keep insisting that merely knowing the facts of Abu Bakr's life is, frankly, not enough.
It's insufficient if it doesn't prompt some kind of internal shift.
Right.
A restructuring of your values and your actions.
Yes. The guide is constantly pushing the reader, the listener. It tells you to stop after every section, every key moment we're about to discuss, and to reflect.
And to ask that question, how can I apply this specific lesson?
How can I apply this lesson on humility or truthfulness or crisis management in my own life, in my work, in my community, today?
That turns a historical account into a constant contemporary mirror.
It really does. Yeah. And think about it in the context of our modern world. If we're talking about the standard of truthfulness upheld by Abu Bakr, this foundational idea of a Siddiq.
The one who confirms the truth.
Right. The practical application for, say, a professional today becomes immediately relevant. How do you maintain verifiable truth in your reporting when you're using algorithms? How do you ensure transparency in a startup where, cutting corners is tempting?
The history gives you the principle.
And you, the reader, have to execute the practice.
So to structure that ambitious journey from 7th century Arabia to 21st century practice, the guide lays out a very logical, very systematic 4-part structure. It's designed so you don't skip any steps in the learning process.
We can map it out pretty clearly. It's a journey. And it starts logically with establishing the context.
Okay, so that's part one, life journey history. This is the foundation. You have to know the man, his world, the chronological events, basically the challenges he faced to even begin to appreciate his responses.
Exactly. And from that historical foundation, it then flows into part two, faith and integrity in the AI era principles.
This sounds like the translation step.
That's a perfect way to put it. It's the decoding mechanism. We take a specific historical event, let's say his actions during the Hydra, the migration, and we extract the universal underlying ethical principles that drove his behavior.
So you're translating the 7th century context into 21st century values.
That's the goal.
And once you have the universal principle, then you need the how-to, you need the manual.
Which brings us to part three, practical applications, practice. This part provides concrete, actionable examples of how these pillars of character-like wisdom or responsibility can actually be implemented in modern scenarios. It's about turning an abstract concept into a real behavioral pattern.
Okay, so history, principles, practice. What's the final stage?
The final stage is the highest one, part four, future vision transformation. This is where it all comes together. It encourages you not just to change your own behavior, but to imagine and then actively build better systems.
Better corporate governance, better community norms.
Better personal character, all of it guided by these ethical frameworks you've just studied. It's about building a legacy, not just, improving next quarter's results.
So it's a really systematic path. History gives the foundation, which informs the principles, which leads to deliberate practice, and then ultimately achieves transformation. It's meant to be exhaustive.
What's also impressive is the audience they're aiming for. The sources are very deliberate about casting a wide net. This is for students, professionals, parents, leaders, researchers.
Well, that just underscores how universal ethical integrity really is, doesn't it? If you're a student, integrity is academic honesty. If you're a developer, it's transparent coding. A parent, it's moral consistency.
The need for that clarity isn't just for the boardroom.
Right.
So the material itself is highly versatile. You can treat it as a formal lesson or a discussion starter for your family or your team, a personal reflection journal, or, and this is key, a complete training module for an organization.
Especially an organization grappling with trust, accountability, or all the ethical gray zones being created by powerful new tech.
Exactly.
The meta lesson here seems to be that integrity isn't some kind of specialization. It's the fundamental operating system you need to succeed in any complex environment.
And to understand that operating system, we now have to turn to the original hardware,
Right.
to the man himself.
Right. Let's get into it.
So as we shift from the framework to the individual, the sources are very insistent on this point. To appreciate his principles, we first have to understand the ground he stood on. We need to know who he was before the prophetic mission ever began.
And the sources start by placing him right in the middle of pre-Islamic Makkah's social structure. He was born into the Banu Taym clan, which was a noble and respected family.
That's important. It gave him social standing, it gave him access, but it also meant his character was under intense public scrutiny. Makkah was a very competitive tribal environment.
And that scrutiny matters. He wasn't some outsider looking in. His reputation was built right there in the center of power.
And the sources list these specific qualities that set him apart, even when he was young. He was known for his honesty, his exceptional wisdom in handling disputes, and a really profound kindness. A kindness that, stood out against the often harsh, materialistic culture of Makkah at the time.
The honesty part feels like the bedrock of everything else. In a society based on trade and tribal honor, a man's word was his bond, right?
It was everything. And the fact that he was so often chosen for arbitration and consultation, it suggests that his community already trusted his judgment more than many others.
His professional life seems to back that up completely. He was a very successful merchant.
And we're not talking about a small-time trader. He was involved in complex caravan journeys, what we would call international commerce. And yet, despite all the temptations and the shrewdness that comes with that kind of business, the sources describe his reputation as spotless.
That's a striking detail. A highly successful merchant with spotless ethics. That's a powerful statement about his integrity.
It implies that his wealth was built on transparent, fair, equitable dealings. It reinforces this image of him not just as a wise man, but as a professionally upright one. He was known for his gentleness in business, not his cunning.
Okay, but here's the part that really speaks to his unique moral compass. The detail that seems to separate him from almost everyone else around him.
The fact that he never worshipped idols.
Hold on, let's just pause on that. That's an extraordinary piece of context. Makkah was the absolute epicenter of idol worship. The entire economy, the entire social structure, it all revolved around the Kaaba and its many deities.
It did.
So for him to actively refuse to participate in the central religious and cultural practice of his society, especially given his noble birth, that must have required immense, quiet courage.
It points to a deep moral and intellectual isolation. He was, for all intents and purposes, a monotheist, or at least a very strict nonconformist, long before the revelation of Islam. It suggests this powerful pre-existing spiritual depth. He was already seeking truth, reflecting deeply, not just, going along with tradition.
So what were the social consequences of that? I mean, did that nonconformity hurt his reputation or his business?
That's the fascinating part. The sources suggest that his moral qualities, his wisdom, his kindness, his proven fairness, they were so compelling that they actually outweighed his religious difference.
So people respected him despite it.
They loved and respected him despite it. It means his personal character was so superior that the community basically tolerated his spiritual independence. And this pre-existing moral filter is exactly why his later acceptance of Islam was so immediate.
He had already built the internal framework for recognizing absolute truth.
Precisely. So by the time the call came, he wasn't someone who was going to be easily swayed or converted through social pressure. He was a successful, respected, and highly reflective individual whose moral compass was, as you said, already pointing due north.
And that sets the stage perfectly for the defining moment of his life. So here's where that established character meets destiny. And it leads to one of the most defining moments in Islamic history, his immediate acceptance of the message.
The speed of conviction is it's paramount here. Abu Bakr was the first adult male to embrace the new faith. And the sources stress that this isn't just a historical footnote. It reveals the profound state of his heart and his mind.
Right, because when he heard the message from the prophet, he didn't need time. He didn't need to deliberate or investigate or, weigh the political risks, which were massive.
He recognized the truth. Instantly. Yeah. The sources capture his reaction with just 2 words. I believe.
I believe. What does that instant recognition tell us about the spiritual journey he was already on?
It tells us his internal landscape was ready. His prior rejection of idolatry, his deep reflection, his commitment to truth. It all meant there was no internal conflict when the message arrived. His character was in perfect alignment with the principles of this new faith. It was a seamless transition, both intellectually and morally.
And unlike others who might have hesitated because they were afraid of losing their status or their wealth, both of which he had in abundance, he prioritized truth above everything else.
Everything. And that instantaneous conversion came with a massive cost.
Absolutely. He was sacrificing his comfortable position, his wealth, which we know he later used to free converts who were slaves, and he was inviting the hostility of all of Makkah.
It was this immediate, unwavering belief, despite that incredibly high cost, that earned him his immortal title.
Let's talk about the weight of that title. This immediate conviction led directly to him being designated as Siddiq.
The one who always confirms the truth.
Which is so much stronger than just being truthful, right?
Oh, it's far stronger. As Siddiq implies a perfect and absolute fidelity to reality, both externally and internally. It means he was the personification of conviction. His character was so integrated, so lacking in pretense or internal contradiction, that he could confirm the highest spiritual truth without ever looking back.
And that title, that certification of his truthfulness, it became his political and moral currency later on.
It did. When the community faced internal doubts or unbelievable events, like the story of the Prophet's night journey, it was Abu Bakr's confirmation that stabilized everyone. He just said, if he said it, I believe it.
That unwavering conviction, which was rooted in his character, it provided an unshakable pillar for that brand new, fragile community.
So the title as Siddiq wasn't just about his relationship with the Prophet. It defined his capacity for leadership. It meant that in any crisis, his decisions would be based on fundamental, verifiable reality and faith, not on political expediency or fear.
And that truthfulness, forged in the heat of that early persecution, was the very quality that would later define his time as leader.
Exactly.
So moving beyond that initial belief, the next phase of his life was really defined by the intensity and the depth of his commitment. And this was a commitment shown through, well, constant personal risk and sacrifice.
This relationship wasn't theoretical, It was operational. It was tested every single day by persecution, poverty, and existential danger.
And the pinnacle of that operational loyalty, as the sources put it, is seen so vividly during the Hijrah, the migration from Mecca to Medina.
We often summarize the Hijrah as just a move, But you're right, it was an escape. It was a life or death situation. The leadership of Makkah was actively hunting the prophet.
So can you elaborate on the specifics of his involvement, the dangers he was facing?
The sources paint a really dramatic picture. This was not some pre-planned, leisurely trip. It was a clandestine escape under the cover of darkness. And Abu Bakr was the only companion chosen to travel with the prophet.
The only one.
The only one. He meticulously prepared for weeks. He got the provisions, the mounts, a reliable and secret guide. He even had his own children running intelligence and supply errands for them during the escape. He put his entire family at risk.
Wow, so he was effectively the head of operations security for this entire mission.
He was.
What about the famous moment in the cave? That's always cited as this ultimate test of courage.
The Cave of Thawr. That's the moment where his loyalty really transitions from proactive planning to active physical sacrifice. When they got to the cave to hide, Abu Bakr insisted on going in first.
To check for snakes, scorpions, anything dangerous?
Yes, he was literally placing his own life on the line before allowing the prophet to enter.
And while they were hiding, the Meccans were so close they could hear their footsteps right above them. The sources describe this profound moment of fear and faith.
They do, and Abu Bakr was terrified. But not for himself. He was terrified for the mission, for his companion. He reportedly looked up and saw the feet of their pursuers just right there.
And when he voiced that fear, he was met with reassurance, not panic.
Right. That conversation in the caves just highlights this unparalleled spiritual closeness and trust between them. He chose to be the calm, protective shield in that moment.
And that fear for the mission rather than for himself, that really speaks to the depth of his spiritual commitment. The fact that he was the only companion on that entire dangerous journey. I mean, he was traveling with the primary target.
Just think about the weight of that singular commitment. If they had been captured, the full wrath of Makkah would have fallen on both of them equally. He bore the full responsibility of protection, of navigation, of comfort for his leader and his friend for the whole trip. This level of risk establishes his capacity for absolute self-sacrifice.
And this action, it cemented an unparalleled relationship. He wasn't just a follower. He was the closest friend, the primary confidant, the financial backer, the most consistent advisor.
It was that convergence of loyalty and spiritual closeness that really defined their bond. Many others had immense love or immense faith. But Abu Bakr was the one who combined absolute love, operational trust proven in moments of extreme danger, huge sacrifice of wealth and status, and this perfect spiritual alignment with the mission.
So it was that unique combination, the comprehensive nature of his support. That's exactly why he became the successor.
His character had been vetted. It had been proven and certified by the prophet himself through, 2 decades of shared struggle. So when the time came for leadership, the choice was anchored in this unrivaled track record of courage and trust.
So after 2 decades of preparation and sacrifice, when history finally demanded he apply that character, what happened? His caliphate, his time as leader, was only 2 years. But it was arguably the most consequential, crisis-ridden period in the community's early existence.
It was a transition from companionship to command under the most traumatic circumstances you can imagine. The crisis was immediate, and it was multifaceted. The prophet's passing delivered this devastating psychological shock to the community, the Ummah.
And many of the followers, their faith was so attached to the person of the prophet, they were suddenly just adrift.
Adrift is the perfect word. And that shock wasn't just emotional. It was political. It was existential.
So what was actually fragmenting the Ummah the moment he took on that leadership role?
Well, there were 3 major things that threatened to just unravel everything. First, the immediate dispute over who should be the successor. Second, you had false prophets rising up in distant regions, claiming new revelations. And third, and this was critical, you had powerful tribes who refused to pay zakat, the mandatory charity, to the central authority in Medina.
So they were essentially declaring political independence.
They were. It looked like a complete political and spiritual collapse was imminent.
So his role wasn't to expand then. It was to stabilize, to unify, and to reassert the foundational principles of the state.
Precisely. He had to apply that unyielding truthfulness of as-Siddiq to just hold the line. And his first big move was to ensure continuity. He sent out the Usama expedition, a military mission the prophet himself had planned just before his death.
And he did that even though his advisors were telling him they needed those troops for defense.
They were begging him to keep the troops home. But it was a monumental act of trust and continuity. Sending that army, even when Medina felt vulnerable, sent an unmissable message.
What was the message?
The caliphate wasn't creating a new policy. It was executing the last order of the prophet. This proved his commitment to continuity and stability, and it just solidified his moral authority from day one.
This then quickly escalates into these necessary defensive and consolidating actions, which we know as the brutal Ridda Wars, the Wars of Apostasy. This is such a critical historical moment that we need to give it the proper context for the listener.
Absolutely. And the sources spend a lot of time on this. These wars were not about expansion. They were about survival. They were about preserving the integrity of the state. The false prophets and the zakat refusers, they represented an existential threat. If they had successfully broken away, the entire foundational structure of the Islamic State would have dissolved.
What was the scale of the challenge he was facing, militarily and politically?
It was total war. It stretched across the entire Arabian Peninsula. Abu Bakr had to show incredible psychological fortitude. Even his core advisors, including Umar, initially wanted a softer political approach with the zakat refusers.
They argued for leniency to try and stabilize things politically.
They did. But Abu Bakr stood firm. He argued that zakat was an inseparable pillar of the faith in the state. To compromise on it was to compromise on the whole mission. He famously declared, "By God, I will fight anyone who differentiates between prayer and zakat."
That decisiveness, standing firm on a foundational principle, even when facing popular and wise opposition from inside his own circle, that's a hallmark of his leadership, isn't it?
It is. It required immense courage to choose military confrontation over what looked like an easier political compromise.
And that path, it saved the community.
It did. His swift, coordinated military response, led by brilliant generals, successfully defeated the rebels, crushed the false prophets, and unified the Arabian Peninsula under one central authority. It ensured that the nascent faith survived its most vulnerable hour.
Okay, so moving from military consolidation to foundational achievements, we have to detail the single most important long-term action of his caliphate.
The preservation of the Quran.
He preserved the Quran.
This is an act of pure visionary leadership. And it wasn't his idea alone, but it was his decisive acceptance of the need that saved the text.
What was the catalyst for it?
After the very bloody Battle of Yamama in 632, many of the companions who had memorized the entire Quran were killed. Umar saw the danger in this and went to Abu Bakr, urging him to compile all the scattered revelations into a single written text.
And the sources note that Abu Bakr hesitated at first, right? He questioned why he should do something the Prophet himself hadn't explicitly done.
Yes, and that hesitation shows his immense humility, his scrupulous adherence to precedent. He was so wary of innovating in religious matters. But Umar persisted, arguing this was a necessity driven by circumstance. It was about preserving the core message itself.
And once Abu Bakr understood that, he accepted the immense responsibility.
He did. And the methodology they used for this compilation, it just speaks volumes about the rigor and the ethical standards he enforced. It was an exhaustive, scrupulously cautious process. He assigned Zayd ibn Thabit, one of the primary scribes, to lead the project. But he demanded that every single verse they collected had to be verified by at least 2 reliable witnesses who could testify they heard the Prophet recite it, and that it had been recorded in writing during the Prophet's lifetime.
So a commitment to dual authentication, rigorous verification.
Which ensured the authenticity of the text for all future generations. This single act, the compilation of the Quran, is the historical significance of his reign. It ensured a continuity that went far beyond the political realm.
Absolutely.
His leadership, defined by that political firmness, that continuity with tradition, and that deep ethical responsibility, it was the necessary bridge. He stabilized the community, he defeated existential threats, and he preserved the central divine text. The sources are clear. His 2 years of leadership saved Islam from collapse at its most critical moment.
That is the ultimate proof that character-driven leadership works when everything else is failing.
It is.
Which brings us back full circle to the original mandate of our sources, connecting this historical narrative back to your life, to the purpose of ethical study. The most powerful takeaway is that his success in that crisis stemmed not from political might,
but entirely from his character. His authority was moral authority, first and foremost.
And that character gives us these concrete, relevant ethical pillars, an actionable blueprint for leaders, professionals, anyone operating in today's complex, high-stakes world.
It does.
So let's detail those specific traits the sources pull out, and let's link them directly to modern applications, especially in tech. We have to start with the foundation, truthfulness as Siddiq.
Well, truthfulness today is, it's under siege. Misinformation, deep fakes, algorithmic opacity. Abu Bakr's standard was absolute, verifiable truth.
So for a leader today, what does that mean?
It means committing to radical transparency. It means ensuring data integrity. It means avoiding self-serving narratives, especially when you're deploying powerful tools like AI that can so easily obscure reality.
Right.
Truthfulness has to be the default setting.
Okay, next pillar. Humility. He was the caliph, the supreme leader, yet he insisted on living simply. He would say he was just a servant of the community and would step down if someone better came along.
And that kind of humility is desperately needed in our modern power structures, especially in the tech world where you have this founder worship. Humility translates to acknowledging the limits of your own power and intellect. It means seeking external checks and balances.
And being willing to reverse course on a bad decision.
Exactly. It's the opposite of the hubris that leads companies to deploy untested technologies just because they can. Humility forces ethical caution.
Then there is wisdom. His wisdom let him make these complex, nuanced decisions under immense pressure, like balancing the military action with the need to preserve the text.
Wisdom in the AI era is about technological foresight. It's about trying to understand the potential societal impact of an innovation 5 or 10 years from now, not just the immediate market advantage. His wisdom was prioritizing long-term preservation over short-term politics. We need that same wisdom to ensure AI serves human flourishing, not inadvertently creating huge societal risks.
Let's talk about vision. He saw past the immediate shock and chaos after the prophet's death. He knew the structure that was needed for the future state.
Vision today means looking beyond the next quarterly report. It means committing resources to ethical safety and governance before a catastrophic failure happens. Abu Bakr's vision was seeing that without a unified commitment to zakat, the entire social safety net would collapse. Modern leaders need the vision to see that without accountability built into our complex systems, the foundational trust that our democracy and our economy rely on will just erode.
And finally, responsibility. He took full, uncompromising responsibility for the entire community at its most vulnerable. He was still, milking sheep for the needy even after he became caliph. It showed that leadership is service.
Responsibility in the tech context is non-negotiable. We're seeing huge accountability gaps, especially when AI systems malfunction or perpetuate bias. Abu Bakr's example shows that true leadership accepts ultimate responsibility. You don't get to delegate blame to the algorithm or the code.
The human leaders who deploy the technology remain fully responsible for its consequences.
They must. The sources really drive this point home. He isn't just a figure in a history book. He is a model for how to build power, not through coercion, but through moral strength.
The foundational integrity he built as an honest merchant, the man who rejected idols and had a spotless reputation.
That was the ultimate resource he deployed during the state's greatest crisis. The material makes it so clear. The character you build in your private life is the only sustainable source of power when a public crisis hits. That's the ethical blueprint for today.
So we've completed this initial deep dive. We've established the systematic framework that our sources use to guide us from history to transformation. We've analyzed the life of a leader whose defining quality, as Siddiq, the one who always confirms the truth, was certified long before his political power ever began.
We tracked his journey. From that highly respected merchant with a pre-existing moral compass, through the intense conviction of his conversion, the unparalleled sacrifice of the Hijra, and that ultimate moment of crisis management during his caliphate, where his principled actions literally saved the nascent community from absolute collapse.
His legacy isn't just in his succession, it's in how he led. With courage, with humility, and with an uncompromising focus on preserving foundational ethics and texts. He proved, really, that a moral foundation is the most critical tool for navigating any existential threat.
In this study, it challenges us, the learner, to really consider this. If Abu Bakr's character, pillars, truthfulness, humility, unwavering commitment to core principles, if those were the keys to saving a community at its most fragile moment, what specific character traits must we urgently cultivate in ourselves and embed in our technological and leadership systems today to safely guide our own future through the radically transformative challenges of the AI era? What fundamentally must we preserve?
That is the central provocative question we want to leave you with, and it leads us perfectly to the next step. Our next deep dive will go even deeper, more minutely into his early life and character formation. We'll dissect the specific principles that established him as Siddiq long before he became the caliph.
We're going to try to understand the very mechanics of how he forged such an unshakable character.
We hope you'll join us then.